Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Views from the Bridge, your second favorite Philadelphia Union podcast, and behind that other one you listen to, I guess. And we're here with our preview show for the Cincinnati match, and so just wanted to see kind of what we can expect as we play Cincinnati, and see how the Union will fare. So I've got Ryan from Flyin Lion Podcast. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Flyin Lion and how you guys got started and how long you've been around, all that kind of stuff, where we can find you.
Yeah, so like he was saying, Flyin Lion Podcast, obviously, Gary the Lion is kind of our mascot, so we did a little play on that. Our logo has, the lion and the wings there, but we've been around for about a year now. I think we recorded our 55th episode or something like that now, so I love your intro and saying, like, you're the second favorite. I mean, we totally get that. We're a little late in the space, getting to it, but it's been fun to do, and like I said, I'm happy to be on tonight and just talking about a good matchup coming up. I think next week, right?
Yeah. We're recording this a little bit early, so I think it's about a week and a half in front of the match, but we don't need to talk specifics about any one game. So just kind of want to get a sense from you about how this season's going. Obviously, Cincinnati's having a great season so far. Second in the East, trying to keep pace with Inter Miami and all their superstars that are down there in Miami. But love to hear what do you think of this Cincinnati season so far? What have you liked about? Obviously, they're having a great season so far. So what have you liked about the team and how they're playing this season?
Yeah, I mean, just based off last year, we get our first trophy, we get the Supporter Shield. We replaced, 5 different guys in our starting 11. So coming into the year, you have high expectations, but at the same time, you want to be a little bit, just careful and in those expectations too. To start the year, a little bit rough, but then, besides the Nashville game that we just lost, we had won 7 in a row. So can't be too mad about that. Like you mentioned, second in the East behind Inter Miami, which I just feel like hopefully something will flip this summer with some of those guys being gone. But yeah, overall, can't be too mad about things where we sit right now and going into the summer.
Yeah. I feel like MLS is a little bit different. Philadelphia's been up at we're not quite at the top of the table this year, but have been. And it's one of those things that, you do wish you win the Supporters Shield every year, but with a playoff structure in place, you just got to get there. You just got to get to the playoffs. So I feel like it is a little bit different of an attitude of if this was a European club season, you're like, Miami's up there. And yeah, you hope something flips because you want to end up top of the table. But we've seen so many examples of teams that have ended up top of the table and then kind of flamed out in the playoffs. And so you kind of got to prepare yourself for that too and have a team that's built for that. So, it is one of those things of you want to fend up first, but you also got to think about playoffs and how that impacts your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the funny thing about MLS too, is you look at Seattle and they don't really kick it into gear until the second half of the season. And then all of a sudden they're, a juggernaut in the playoffs. But during the season, I can't imagine, what their fans feel like, game to game, being like, man, what are we doing? And then, like you said, they can get it together and kind of bring it back around. So that's a good point.
Yeah. So as you guys think about, you're having a great season so far. Things are going real well. Who are the players that you've liked so far? Who have been kind of the standouts? Who can Union fans watch for during that game?
Yeah, so obviously, Lucho Acosta, MVP last year. That's an easy one to just say, but I really think it's highlighted by some guys that we brought in. We had Alvaro Barrial that had left. He's on loan right now. So you have a new left wing back in Orishano. And then, up top, we got a couple of young guys, one being Kevin Kelsey. So that's the guy that I'm going to kind of shout out for this matchup. He's a big physical striker up front that can hold the ball up. But he's young, he doesn't have a ton of experience in playing a lot of minutes. So against an experienced back line with the Union, I'm excited to see what he can offer, and his connection with Lucho has been interesting so far this year.
Yeah. Oh man, I had a thought and then it left me of what I was going to ask next about that.
Sure.
But yeah, Acosta has been a great player for many years in this league for a couple of different teams. So it's fun to see the success he's having for you guys this year. and last year. Um, what seems to make Cincinnati tick, or what seems to be the success? Like what is bringing that success to Cincinnati so far?
Justin, it's funny you say like so far. I would say for 7 wins in a row, it was all Lucho. He carried the team for a while there, and like we were relying on him so much. So the buzz around Cincinnati was like, who else can we get to contribute? Who else can we get to add to our attack? But like I said, Kevin Kelsey, Oriano, and then really getting some of our midfield going as well. Besides them, so that's what I would say mainly is just seeing other guys contribute besides Lucho. It's been interesting because all of the goal contributions, or a lot of them, have, like I said, been through Lucho. So we don't want to seem one-sided or just relying on him. But our defense has really been great this year. Is really what I'm going to highlight. I think you guys kind of set the standard a few years ago, with your defenders, and then seeing some of the guys we have now with Miazga and with Miles Robinson. We've gotten kind of spoiled by that. I think we'll really miss Miles coming up in the summer here. He's with the
Yeah.
U.S. team for Copa America, so that's another point that I'm just going to mention is look out for that. How does our defense look without him?
Yeah, for sure. Um, Obviously, there's always holes to every team. As good as the season could be, there's always holes or things that you're like, man, they just struggle against these kinds of players or this kind of system or whatever. What do you see as kind of the weaknesses of the Cincinnati team so far?
Yeah, so the outside wing backs, obviously we have Yedlin now, so that's an experienced guy. But Orishano, like I've been mentioning, he's newer on the left side there. So really attacking down that left side, it's been hard to kind of watch him. And then Ian Murphy's our other center back there. Teams have been trying to exploit that. I think when teams swing the ball into the box, especially with not having Miles Robinson for this game, that's really where I would say the weakness is going to be. Sometimes in transition, we get kind of too caught up. Lucho gets hung up in the box and kind of gets gassed, and then we have the midfield that's trying to close down that space between. And I think you guys are kind of set up very similar to us, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. It's always interesting. That was kind of going to be my next line of questioning. I think it's interesting. I think there's just probably this sense for Union fans that we kind of see Cincinnati's like younger brother. It's like, okay, Noonan went, and all this kind of stuff, and and then we've had a share of players who have left Philadelphia to come to Cincy. Obviously you've got a coach that has been around the Philly system, so that's gonna help. All that kind of stuff. So how do you guys see kind of the relationship between Philadelphia and Cincinnati and kind of the player? Obviously, things change once some new players come into the system, and you got to play to you got to play a system that the players that you have can play. But how do you see kind of the relationship between Philadelphia and Cincinnati?
Well, I mean, I thank you guys, number one, for letting Pat and Chris Albright for coming over. You guys have just set us up with two great guys, and then as much as the team has been lined up well and what they've had, like you said, Sergio Santos is another guy. I think Ray Gaddis comes to mind as well.
Mm.
Seeing some of those guys and how well they did for you guys, coming over and doing the same for us, there's a good respect there. I think what's underrated, though, is how you guys have set up your academy system and how we've kind of tried to implement that after what you've been doing. You see a little bit more success with that this year. We had, I think, Stefan Chirilla. He's I think, 17-year-old guy that just came from your academy to ours. So I hope we're not like just poaching players from you guys, but I think we're trying to model our system, really after you, and that's a really good respect thing.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I've had a lot of from some time in Pittsburgh and then Philadelphia. I've had a lot of interaction with Cincinnati fans and just different things that way. And then from going back to the USL days and then obviously MLS play as well. And I think like it is interesting because I feel like even for the Union, the success of the academy took time. It wasn't okay, hey, first year we're in the league, our academy's there and producing players. Now, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the line, you're starting to see players, the Aronson brothers and Jack McGlynn now, and some of the Nate Harriel, some of these guys who are now on the U.S. Olympic roster, you know, coming through from the academy to play. But it does take time to develop that, and I feel like there was a lot more early on for us. There was a lot more, hey, stealing players or poaching players from other academies to come play for the Union. But I think that over time, given, hey, we are going to develop these young guys, we are going to give them shots on the first team, and you know there is going to be a place for them coming up through the system. That will turn out, you know, that'll turn out spades, you know, for you. And I feel like that's one of the levels that, as a Union fan and as someone who covers the team, I take a lot of pride in the fact that, hey, as an organization, you know, we have two guys on the Olympic roster coming up. You know, obviously Brendan Aronson just had a great and at least end of the season with Union Berlin. Mark McKenzie's doing great things in Europe as well. And so it just feels like, all right, hey, we've got something going, and that the Union's success, though this season has been a little bit of a downturn, I also feel like, hey, we will continue to have guys coming through the system, and maybe this season is one of those indications of, hey, there's not a ton of guys who are ready, but that doesn't mean that the academy is not working. So I think as much as Cincinnati can replicate that, and obviously Pat and Chris have had a ton of experience with that and seeing how to do that and do that well, they'll continue to do that. So.
Oh, for sure. Do you feel like the little brother thing is like real then? Like how you guys like perceive us? I mean, like 2.0 almost in a way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. As I think about it, I think we like it is kind of that big brother little brother thing of like, we don't want you to be better than us, you know what I mean? Like it's like we can't let little brother be better than us, you know. And so I think this season especially has been a little bit of a challenge of like, in last season, though the Union were towards the top of the table last year too, and we were kind of fighting it out all the way through the end of the season. But I think, you know, it has kind of been challenging as a Union fan of like, oh man, we let those guys go and now they're doing it better than us, at least on the
Right.
MLS level, you know. Who knows on the academy level still, but I think the Union, the first team level, it's like, ah, man, shoot, what do we do here?
Right.
So, but
As
a
long as
lot
you
of
have
those guys you mentioned, Sergio Santos, Ray Gaddis, Harris Union, and you know, Chris and Pat have always been great servants of the Union, and we wish them nothing but the best as they go and do new things. We just wish we could have kept them around a little longer, but Jim Curtin's doing a great job. And so, you know, those guys aren't going to have spaces and times to do what they need to do. And so they've got to go somewhere else to develop. So
Yeah.
wish them nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
That I mean, what I was just going to mention about I guess Jim. I don't know if you watched the U.S. men's national team game yesterday, but I mean, how's the feeling about him this year and with what's been going on? I guess the last few seasons, rumors about going to the U.S. team and managing. Has there been a lot of buzz about that?
There has been, and we've talked about it a little bit of like, hey, what would happen if this would go? And I think like, you know, I think we were hoping it would happen a couple years ago when we could have, you know, maybe kept some of the guys that we've let go to other places, to continue their coaching careers. You know, Brendan Burke is one that, you know, went out to the USL in Colorado Springs, was doing really well, now is on the Houston bench. And, you know, it's like, man, that would be a great, you know, it would have been a great thing to keep him around for a couple of years, and then he could have replaced Jim and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, though, I mean, Jim's got to do what he wants to do and got to do what he feels is best for his career and his timing. And so I think, you know, and the U.S. has to do what they think is, you know, the Federation has to do what they think is best. And so if it never happens, that's great. I think he'll be around Philadelphia for a long time if, you know, if the U.S. job doesn't come around. But it would have been fun. I think it would have been fun to see that, and I think he could have potentially been a good fit for that role.
Hmm.
But oh well. I'm not gonna be mad that he's kept around for a couple more years. I mean, he's the longest tenured coach in MLS, and that says something. That says something about the job he's been doing, and you know, he'll get a shot somewhere at some point. So all these guys do. Jesse Marsh got his shot, and I'm sure Jim will get his shot at some point in time somewhere else too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, anything else about this game or anything else about this matchup that you wanted to talk about that we missed?
I guess so. This game, I believe, is it at Philadelphia?
I think this one's in Cincy, actually.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to our stadium?
I have not. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I see a decent amount whenever we have home games against you guys. Like, you guys travel pretty well, and I'm hoping that we're the same way when we go there. But yeah, no, I always see photos, and I obviously look at the name of your podcast, and I'm like, you guys have a beautiful, backdrop to your stadium.
Yeah.
Um, so props to that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're right downtown. We're right by the bars and stuff. So if you ever get an opportunity, I think it's a great setting for a soccer or football match.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll definitely try to make a trip out at some point in time. And I know the Union fans do travel well. I know there seems to be a bus almost every game to wherever it is, if it's within busing distance. So, um, yeah, it'll be a fun matchup. Midweek. I think it's a midweek game, so midweek games are always weird. But we'll go from there and see what happens. So, thanks for being on. Can you tell us where we can find you or find your podcast to find out more if we're interested?
Yeah, for sure. So the Flyin Lion Podcast, you can find us on X or Twitter and on Instagram as well. And then, we record about once a week, and we'll be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can find us there. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Union Cincy, I think midweek game, and it'll be fun to see what happens. Always a testy matchup, and always a complicated game to figure out how to come out with points. So it'll be a fun matchup going forward. But you can find us at VFTB Pod wherever you find your podcasts, and all the social networks, and we'll be there. And let us know what you think about this matchup coming up, and then we'll react to it afterwards. So thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.